Hey, it's Steve here again, and today I'm with nutritionist Jane Aherne, and we're going to talk about sports nutrition, but we're going to talk about a slightly different approach, which I think we both take, which is to approach sports nutrition in a slightly more, whether you want to call it holistic, integrated, more of a functional medicine approach to sports nutrition, whatever it might be, but approaching it in a slightly different way, I guess, than what might be the classic approach for sports nutrition. So when we talk about more of a classic approach to sports nutrition, we might be speaking more like things are a bit more mathematical, whereby, you know, it's a certain equation, you're a certain weight or a certain height, you might need this much energy, or this research paper says you need this much to create this end outcome goal. Whereas I think we both kind of approach it with a slightly more rounded, more individualized approach. Do you want to kind of just jump in and give me, I guess, how would you approach a client that comes into you that's got some sports related goals?
Well, definitely, I mean, we spoke a bit about the sort of mathematical side of it. That has its place to a certain degree. You know, the research is there, but it sort of gives the idea that in terms of physiology that we're all basically the same, which we are in one respect, but there are so many other factors and outside influences that could affect your training, your nutrition, and your physiology. So yes, you know, the guidelines are there, but they are just that, a guideline. You would have to consider someone's tolerance to certain macronutrients, whether they're getting sufficient micronutrients as well. But not only that, sort of what's going on for them, what are the training patterns like, how's their sleep, what other commitments do they have they any conditions or illnesses or things that need to be taken into consideration, what do they like to eat or what they can and can't eat. There's so many other things that need to be sort of brought in, and as I say, the science is there, the maths is there, but it's only to be used as the kind of maybe sort of starting area, and then you kind of grow on that based on the individual and what works for them.
Yeah,
because
I think people come in with their own kind of I sometimes see it like a bit like a jigsaw puzzle with clients. Yeah. So they have so much different things, and every different person's a different jigsaw puzzle essentially, and we've got to try and piece the pieces together. And human physiology is quite similar to that in the sense that yes, you might everyone is essentially the same, but if we've got slight imbalance in the thyroid, or if we've got a slight issue with the digestive system, or if there's some slight imbalances with hormones, if these are being affected by someone's external stresses, or they've just been through a bad breakup, or someone's just passed away that's really close to them, then our approach with clients has to be in line with that as well. That would be my perspective, because someone's physiology essentially changes all the time. Like, you know, that person that sits in front of you with one session, then 4 weeks later might have a whole bunch of different stresses. Their training program might have even changed.
Might have injured themselves.
Yeah, might have injured themselves. Something like that is changing all the time. So the nutrition has to then adapt with that individual. And I think, like you say, we can have these things that will guide us from research, these equations, these supplements, whatever they might be, they guide us. But then it's up to the nutritionist to actually then pull in, who's the person sitting in front of me, who's the human sitting in front of me, and how can I support them with that as well.
Absolutely, and I think you mentioned it as well, there are supplements and things like that. There's supplements have their place as well as the guidelines do, but they're almost sort of an easier thing to go to, like we talked about the mathematics and the physiology behind the kind of, this scoop contains X amount, and therefore this, if I put it in me and this and that and the other, then that will give me the result I want. But one of the things I find sometimes with kind of supplements is then you tend to have more of sort of the kind of pills or the scoops or whatever. You probably could sometimes, not always, sometimes supplements are necessary, but just changing the diet and incorporating everything naturally might be a better way to go, and it also sort of ensures that you're getting everything, not just the right macronutrients, but everything's involved in that.
Yeah, I think we're both aligned with this. So essentially for me, the supplements, especially from a sports nutrition perspective, when you're looking at those fine margins that you would want to get with an athlete, that needs to come after working on the foundational stuff with a client that you're seeing. So sleep, stress, nutrition, all of those things, because they're going to give you your biggest percent change in one's output or their result, whatever it's going to be. Then maybe you can then look at these kind of very if I give you this, then it helps with this.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the research is within sports nutrition, is that if I take this one compound, it's going to, say for example, if I take creatine, it's going to have X amount of percentage improvement on power output or whatever it might be. That's cool, but if you're not sleeping and you're not eating very well and you're not recovering very well,
just wasting your money.
You're just wasting your money, because you can get a much bigger improvement in power output, as an example, if all of those things are looked after first. Then you can come onto that. And I think you're right, there tends to be a little bit of a reliance upon what's the next supplement that's going to make the difference, rather than how can I observe my nutrition and lifestyle and start to make those changes, because actually that feels a little bit harder and a bit more overwhelming, because it's harder, it's easier to take a scoop of powder and pop a couple of pills than it is to make some changes with nutrition and lifestyle. But you'll probably agree with me, this is going to give you a much better outcome in terms of how someone's physiology is working, and therefore their end result from a sports nutrition perspective.
Absolutely. I think, you can take everything that, people recommend, everything under the sun, but essentially if you're not kind of going back and making sure that everything is working as it should be, and that is not always just nutrition, there's so many other aspects, it is, as I say, wasted and sometimes not even safe.
So I'll use a little bit of a case study. So I had a client, an MMA fighter that I was working with just I saw him again a few weeks ago, but we started working with each other a couple of months ago, and it was recurrent illnesses, like not being able to compete, therefore not being able to train because he was getting ill all the time, and then his fighting performance was dropping down as well. And his was as simple as, he had a bunch of digestive issues, and his was as simple as he was trying to eat so frequently and so close to bedtime that it was causing all sorts of digestive troubles that were then affecting his sleep pattern. And we literally changed his meal frequency and a couple of little adaptations with his food, but predominantly his meal frequency, and gave him an adequate amount of fasting time each day. And since then, no issues at all. Like, it's unbelievable how like a simple thing can create such a profound effect on performance in that individual that would have been overlooked otherwise. I just thought I'd throw a case study out there, because I think it's interesting to look at it in that slightly different way.
As I say, and this is where the confusion comes in. People think they're following everything like step by step, and why isn't it working? And this is one of the main things probably you see as well, people being so frustrated that they think they're doing the correct protocol, but it's not having the desired effect. And that's when you have to think, okay, well, let's pull it all back and start sort of naturally, let's get everything working properly. Because, as I say, it's pointless if it's not all working as it should be. There's no point trying to add then onto that, because you want a certain goal.
Makes sense. So I think the key thing for us here is just to outline the approach that we take, which is that much more kind of rounded, holistic approach, in the sense that when clients come in to see us, it's going to be an assessment of their medical history, their health history, like probably even trauma history and psychological stresses, that type of thing, looking at digestion, hormones, understanding kind of cognitive function, energy levels, all of those things, plus then the nutrition, the sleep, the stress, what their rest and relaxation is like, what their training is like, and the intensity, and whether that training is changing. And then it's our job to kind of pull all that together, and then working with the goals of that individual is then make it simple. And I think that's the key thing with this, is that the approach might sound complicated because we're trying to take this bird's eye view of everything. But ultimately what we can do is we can go, okay, you're coming into me with all of this stuff going on. So this is that jigsaw puzzle with just bits and pieces everywhere. That's kind of a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. I don't know how you do it, but a lot of people just go around the edges to start off with, right? So you find the edge bits and you kind of put that round. So it's like, what's the low-hanging fruit that we can work on first? And oftentimes it's the low-hanging fruit that gives you the best results. And then you start with that, and then we work through. But the client itself will focus on, okay, these are my next few steps. This is my goal, this is what I'm trying to achieve, but these are my next few steps to be able to achieve that. And then you can get slightly more into the more complexy stuff later on. But my opinion is that as you work on the low-hanging fruit, all of those other areas of complexity, someone's digestive issues or this or that, then actually start to address themselves once you work on the low-hanging fruit. Is that your kind of experience?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that has been, as I say, and like you even say, sort of step by step. There's always kind of the big goal, but we don't just go directly from A to Z. There are steps along the way, and it's looking, as you say, at all these, a complicated thing, and then finding the sort of the simplest way of sort of moving forward and making it easy. These things should be easy, they should be able to fit in, and sometimes I think people can overcomplicate them, but that is sort of the core value I have of like taking all the complicated bits and just sort of simplifying it and making sure that it's right for the individual.
Yeah. So if that sounds like an approach that you like the sounds of, and you think you want someone to really help support you through that process, then do feel free to get in contact. You can use the contact form, and we can move on from there and help you with your goals.